Hey boys and girls, welcome to class today. Today's a little bit special. We're going to have story time. So sit back, relax, but not too much, because you do need to take some notes. You need to write down some main points of the story because it's going to come up on some essay questions coming up, I'm sure of it. So sit back and relax a little bit, but have some paper and pencil handy so you can write some notes. I'm going to tell you the story of the life of Buddha. Now, a long time ago, in what is present-day Nepal, there was a king and queen. Now, the queen was expecting a child, and before this child was born, she had a dream where a white elephant with 6 tusks entered into her side. Now, after that, Siddhartha Gautama was born. That's the name, Siddhartha Gautama. He was not the Buddha yet. But this baby's birth was wildly celebrated. The infant was given the name Siddhartha because that name meant he who achieves his aim. During his birthday celebration, a special seer came from his home, and he announced to everyone that this baby would either grow up to be a great king or would grow up to be a holy man. Now, Siddhartha grew up in a very luxurious setting. In fact, he had 3 palaces built for him, and his dad was so excited for him to be a great king. He was so excited for him to be a great king, in fact, that he shielded him from religious teachings, and he shielded him from the world. He grew up in a very sheltered setting because his father wanted him to live in the palace and be king, and did not want him necessarily to go out and be a religious person. Now, eventually, Siddhartha wanted to leave the palace and go meet his subjects. His dad reluctantly allowed him to go out and see the kingdom, but he first tried to clean up the kingdom. He made sure that anybody that was sick or injured or hurt or old or anyone that was suffering was removed so that Siddhartha would not see these people. However, the story goes that there was one old man that they still had in the kingdom, and as Siddhartha went out on his coach to go visit the people in his kingdom, he saw this old man. And the story goes that he had never seen somebody old and suffering before, and so he asked his driver why the guy looked like that. The driver told him that all people eventually grow old. Now, in a few more journeys outside of the palace, he saw other people that were suffering or old or beggars, and this was a new experience for him and hit him pretty strongly. Siddhartha decided that he was going to leave the palace and live life as an ascetic. Now, ascetic is a word you need to know. Asceticism, it means somebody who tries to get rid of worldly goods in order to find more spiritual truths. So Siddhartha decided to go live as an ascetic, and he went out and became a beggar. During his life, he went to be taught by 2 wise hermits. He learned from them and mastered their teachings, and in fact, these hermits wanted Siddhartha to be the next person in charge that would teach. Siddhartha was not satisfied with the teachings that he had and knew that he still had more to learn. So he left those 2 hermits and moved on. Siddhartha later met up with 5 companions, and they decided to journey together in an attempt to take their lives to the next level. One thing they tried to become enlightened was by depriving themselves of almost all the worldly goods. Siddhartha restricted himself to eating only a nut or a leaf a day. While he was doing this enlightening diet, he decided to take a bath, and while he was taking a bath, he fainted in the river from lack of nourishment and almost drowned. After this happened, Siddhartha decided to start rethinking his path. It was then that Siddhartha came up with what he called the middle way. He realized that depriving yourself of things was not the real way to get enlightenment, but he also realized that too much indulgence was not the way either. So a good balanced middle path was the way to go. So he actually sat down under a tree and told himself, I am not going to leave this tree until I know the path of enlightenment. Well, the 5 people that were traveling with him decided to leave him. They thought he had just given up. But Siddhartha hadn't. He decided to stay and meditate until he had reached enlightenment. Before he meditated, he accepted a bowl of milk and rice pudding from a little girl, and he sat there and meditated. He meditated under the tree for 49 days before he reached enlightenment. From that point on, after he reached enlightenment, he was known as the Buddha. And Buddha just means an enlightened one. At this point in his life, he had a complete awakening into the nature and cause of human suffering. After he discovered what the cause was, he then discovered what the solution for it was. And he categorized his insight into what is now called the Four Noble Truths. He also then discovered the characteristics that all Buddhas are said to have. After reaching enlightenment, the Buddha couldn't decide if he would teach this pathway or this Dharma to other people. While he was deciding, he was told that there will be those who will understand the Dharma, and since Buddha was compassionate to all things, he agreed to do it. He taught and gained disciples little by little, and for the rest of his life, the Buddha traveled around teaching this doctrine to a range of people. So that's the main story of how Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. Now keep this story in mind as you study the next movie, where we will talk about the path that the Buddha teaches is the path away from suffering and the path to enlightenment. Think about the story and how that might have influenced some of his discoveries or the way that he thought about life. Thanks for being here for story time, and enjoy the next movie.